Blacksmith of the Apocalypse. By Arcuser. Chapter 851. The fire seeping in. Eskik felt the fire seeping into his body as it burned away his flesh and miasma. At the same time, he kept absorbing the dark power from the air to heal himself. However, there was nothing else he could do. The fire was not weakening, and the unfamiliar pain he felt for the first time in hundreds of years made it hard for him to cast spells. He was stuck in a loop of burning and regenerating. Scraping together all his concentration, he managed to form a thin layer of miasma on his skin that kept the fire at bay. Interesting, if I keep burning you, can I clear out all the miasma in the dungeon? The cocky human asked with a smirk. The Lich stared at him, now with hatred in his eyes. What have you done to me? What is this fire? He swung his burning arm at the man. It was already a move of desperation. The man vanished, evading his hand with ease, using a kind of short-distance teleport. It's just a slightly special flame, other than that? I'm just making sure it keeps burning. Since I can't seem to find your phylactery, I have to try something else. The bard taunted him, but his words stuck in his head. Didn't that mean that the little man had a way to find his soul? For a moment he thought that it was a good thing he had hidden it in his home world. Then he questioned this notion in despair when his focus wavered for a moment and the flame bit into his flesh again. Oh, look like the show is starting. This was his chance. The man was looking at his companion. He had to attack while he was distracted and end this terrible fire. Eskik charged forward to attack the blacksmith from behind, but the flame suddenly increased in intensity to the point that his body was almost turned to ashes in the blink of an eye. He had not traveled even half the distance to reach the man, when he broke down, writhing in pain. A tremendous force was pressing down on his burning body and the power of the flame intensified. You just stay over there, lay low. Don't think I can't make you regret your immortality, the man warned with a murderous tone. The Lich didn't know why, but he believed every word the little man spoke. His voice had an overpowering persuasiveness. And maybe, the Lich already regretted it. Seth was buying time. It was also his best strategy. Seeing how the undead was able to control and heal, even shield himself with the surrounding miasma, if Seth destroyed its body, it would just reform from the miasma somewhere else. He also couldn't find the boss soul. The spirit blacksmith had no idea how Eskik did it, but he could not even see a soul connection or something similar to his phylactery. Seth bet it was because of some dungeon shenanigans. Seeing how he couldn't cheat his way to victory, he had to drain its resources so it couldn't regenerate anymore. While the flame of Phlegathon was eating away at the Lich, the boss was forced to use up miasma to regenerate his corporeal form. The Lich was like a wick and the miasma was his wax. Seth just had to make sure that the candle burned out. While the bard acted relaxed on the outside and made the suppression look effortless, this strategy was actually costing him a lot of mental power and mana. Not even his legendary items would have enabled him to go through with it. It was all thanks to his reforged soul armaments that raised his stats and mana by an obscene amount. It wasn't just the mana and the plain attribute increases but also stats improvements like regeneration and the additional stat multipliers from Titan Physique. With these, he could keep this up for hours, and adding Link's buff food and Allison's high-quality potions, he was able to keep it up almost indefinitely. But Seth was only able to act so relaxed because this was infinitely easier than belching out a powerful tune. Singing, playing, and resisting the mental encroachment of an otherworldly eldritch deity was a much greater burden on his body and mind than using these abilities. Being able to simply use his abilities like this and not having to multitask all the time, while balancing on the edge of insanity had something therapeutic. The bard had deliberated to do something similar as he did with Angelique or Solar Solace. However, he didn't like the Lich King. He was not in the mood to try and brainwash the boss, nor could he use seeds of Hades without his soul. As the soul was also out of his grasp, all that was left was killing it. And since the blacksmith had to wait, he simply sat down at the edge of the stone coffin and watched the others fight below. Everyone seemed motivated to beat him and gave it their all, displaying their best skills and coming up with new strategies on the go. Mina, for example, had teamed up with Evie, Edwards, and Lixis. Pulled in by the power of magic wards, the undead knights approached the Black Dome, only for a storm of shadow blades and magic to shoot out from the darkness and blow them apart. In this environment, Mina could fully take advantage of her power as a shadow mage and the improvements her rings gave her. The three mages had combined the protection of hiding in the darkness of Mina's Erebus with Evie's abilities to lay down magic wards to manipulate monsters. The immortal witch's necromancy skills were currently restricted because of the power of the miasma that would intrude on them and wrestle away her control. With the undead approaching and the casters hiding inside, Mina's dark dome became a meat grinder for the attacking Death Knights. Outside, Edward was flying around pulling aggro with attacks and taunts to create a train for the dome to take down Jess and James in a slightly wilder strategy, one that was quite pleasing to the blacksmith's eyes. They were flying around with the dragonfly golems and spreading fire on a big scale. With the protection of Lohe, Jess was now also able to bring down divine fire, which had had the same effects on the undead as cursed fire for everyone else. Maybe even better. It was similar to the fire of Phlegathon Seth was currently using on the boss. Like Jess and James, Azul was also on the move, but she was riding Ceres, the storm elemental golem. Together they brought the thunder, frying whole batches of knights, swinging their massive swords at them. The most unlikely group was probably the team of priests who proved to be an unexpected nightmare to the undead hordes. Led by Finn, burning in a bright golden shine, Bulko and Ferdinand brought devastation to the enemy, healing, and blessing swaths of destruction through their rows. They were the most dangerous to the undead, by a large margin, not even leaving a pile of bone meal in their path. Apart from these calamities rampaging across the crypts without holding anything back, were the vanguard, looking for worthy opponents that survived the magical hazing. There were quite a few names elites, who could have been a boss in any other dungeon, that survived the bombardment of the mages. Mike and Lydia, a big humanoid lion and wolf, were stalking the battlefield sniping and burning whoever was still left without any problems. Phaenis was on her own, but it was obvious she had no problem dealing with the elites. When facing the chosen of Phobos, her opponents always seemed to be caught in an illusion, evading dangers that were not there, jumping into attacks they did not perceive. The mountain brigands easily played with their fears to make them move as she wanted, finishing them off with the marvelous, magnificent, mad Yatagan Mim burning with an invisible aura as if it was surrounded by a heat haze. Watching all of this unfold, Seth felt proud about how much everyone had grown. Even when they liked to act that way, the blacksmith didn't feel like he was that far ahead of them. Without his items, there was no way he could beat any of them. Yet, he did not just feel proud, he couldn't help but watch the battle with the eyes of an expert. While he was watching the battle unfold, he felt the urge to make them even stronger. To perfect their items and bring out the most for each of them. But they would need some motivation to strive to become even stronger. Eskek's non-existent heart throbbed, as he watched the little man observe the carnage happening with an eerie smile. It was the plotting smile of a villain, and suddenly he glanced at him. "I see you can slightly withstand this intensity, Shall we quicken the pace then? I have to finish you off before they are done with your minions after all." If anyone else said that, Eskek would have ridiculed them. He would have thought about his power and the armies he had at home, but currently, the Lich was just glad that this man had no way to follow him to his home world. He was almost convinced that he would have died instantly if his phylactery was in this realm. "Just to be sure, you will drop this crown, if I kill you, right?" Chapter 852 Raise God. Colossal Dungeon, the Castle. Monique cursed as the Death Knight in front of her healed once again, after she had almost blown it apart with her divine spear. Lamar was a harder nut to crack than the party around Monique and Jonah thought at first. King Marcus was manageable, but Lich Lamar had enough time to prepare. Not only was the boss an archmage, but it also had control over the undead they had passed on the lower floor. Every time his undead were about to fall apart, he even acted as a healer and used the surrounding miasma to regenerate them. This time, they were facing a well-put-together party of colossal undead working like a clockwork under the control of the Lich in the back. A party made up of colossal elites and bosses that constantly regenerated with the surrounding miasma, while they suffered status effects from the same environment. "Allison, Shay, can you do something about the Lich?" she called back to the rearguard. The vanguard made up of her, Jonah, Dahu, Beemont, and Ellen were busy trying to hold back the 5 elite Dark Knights that made up the Lich's front row, while Link and Archer were having a shoot-off against the 2 crossbowmen beside Lamar. This only left the mages to directly fight against the Lich, since Tekker was busy offsetting the Lich's magic attacks. But it was not that easy. Lamar had surrounded himself with various shields and barriers that were powered and strengthened by miasma. "I'm empty. I used my everything on the last boss and didn't really have time to recover," Allison lamented. There was the function of Armor of Lunacy, but the last breakout had made the alchemist careful of the armor's effects and she didn't dare to take one of the Lich's attacks head-on. "Shay!" Jonah called out, as he gracefully split the shield of a knight with his attack. Sorry, but it's pretty much the same for me. The water mage admitted embarrassed. He had used the ultimate skill of his ring earlier and Olaf's skills from the bracelet were not helpful in a group fight in such an open space. Looking on in despair, however, was Ray, who couldn't help anyone whatsoever. His curses had no effect on the undead as the miasma simply swallowed the dark energy. Even if he used other shamanistic skills or even his healing spells, it did next to nothing to the colossal enemy. It was not the first time he felt like this and he slightly regretted the class he chose. Even with a legendary ring, he was only stuck at being kind of helpful but never being able to really contribute in big fights. Everyone was equipped with terrifying items, whose effects often dwarfed the extent of his debuffs. Now especially, when nothing worked at all, he felt useless and blamed himself for his weakness. The inability to help his friends in a dire situation cut deep into him. "Do you want strength?" a hushed voice whispered in his ears. It was dark and gritty and uncomfortable to his ears, but what the voice said made Ray listen up. Was it finally his turn to get a blessing, or even become a chosen? "Kook, I don't have the power to just make a chosen, but I can make you my saint," it said with its voice like grinding gears and screeching styrofoam. But, was that enough? Could becoming a saint make him able to have an impact on the situation before them? He didn't even know what god this was, and saints also had certain duties, unlike chosen ones. Stuff like building up a community and creating a church, or spreading faith. "Hoo-hoo, I am called Solfium, the Dark Sun. I'm the god of curses and dark magic in this world. With my power, I guarantee you, that you will be able to make a difference in this situation. All you have to do is accept my power and spread my name. My followers do not need a church." Ray couldn't help but think that he knew the name from somewhere. Had he read it before? But he couldn't remember where and what it was about. Still, this was the first time a god offered his assistance to him. If nobody had moved up to now, did he really have a choice? If becoming a saint meant being able to proudly stand together with everyone and fight their foes with confidence, then why not? "I accept," he thought intensely. "That's the right attitude. Receive my power and no darkness will ever be able to resist before your might," the cracking voice spoke in glee. Like burning gasoline, he felt power surging into his body and rampaging through his veins. It was a dark and intense power, like a pond of tar filled with electric eels. The shaman cried out in pain as the power seeped into his flesh. Tattoos surfaced on his skin, painting complicated and intricate patterns across his body. They started out in a light blue, but they kept growing in number and overlapping each other. As more and more of them intersected with each other, they became darker and darker until Ray's body had become an unnatural bluish-black. "Ray! What is going on?" Shay exclaimed in a panic, but the shaman could not answer, as he convulsed in pain. At the time when the pain finally receded, he had a hard time even seeing his own hand in the thick miasma that had filled the rooms, but he could also feel the immediate effects of his transformation. With every breath of the dark fog, he felt power run through his body. What was this? There was no answer, but knowledge flooded his mind. His status was a saint, but his new class was Warlock of Solfium. The fundamental effect of this change was that he no longer possessed mana or mana regeneration. Instead, his power stemmed from the darkness he absorbed from the outside and turned into his own resource. In exchange for the lacking regeneration, there was no limit to his pool of power. He also knew that the magic he had learned would be twice as powerful when using his converted dark power. And as if a restriction had been lifted, he also remembered where he had heard the name of this god before. It was in one of the books he had read in the library of Minas March. He was one of the few who used his free time to read through the previous owner's collection. Solfium was mentioned once in a while, but it did not mean Dark Sun, it meant Ugly Sunday. He was the god of curses and dark magic, but he was not evil, but actually a good deity with an unfortunate fate. His appearance was ugly because his very existence was to absorb darkness to give the world light. Still, in the end, he was a shunned god, since dark magic and curses were usually the powers of villains. The deeds of his followers would often put him in a bad light, and even the bad deeds of people who were not his followers would often be blamed on him. Ray halted for a moment. Had he really read all that about this god? "I added a little something to give you the full picture. There is one more thing." Ray already knew, the unlimited power basin also came at a price. The more he absorbed, the more his appearance would suffer as he was contaminated with evil. The warlock didn't mind, as he wasn't interested in romantic relationships in the first place. "Ray, what happened to you?" Shay was beside him and put his hand on his shoulder. Ray looked at him with a smile as he stood up. The warlock flexed his muscles and they bulged, bigger than ever before. He looked at Shay and found that he had also grown by several centimeters. This was another effect of his new power. Although his appearance would suffer, it didn't relate to his health. As Solfium was absorbing darkness to become stronger, Ray's physical powers would only rise with the power he stored. Don't worry. I may look weird, but it's not a bad thing. Actually, I became a saint, he declared and took his new power for a spin. The pitch-dark fog around them immediately started lightening, as the power rushed into his power, filling his infinite basin with a flood of dark power. As the power was converted during entry, he felt the impurities accumulate in his body, leading to the changes Solfium's information had mentioned. There was nothing worrying about it as the power he received far outweighed the cost. Channeling the pure force he collected through his hands, he got ready to cast one of his new skills. Everyone, get out of the way. Black Blast. A beam of crackling dark energy, like an inverted laser beam, shot out from his hand. As it traveled through the thick miasma, it only grew in size until it finally crashed into the shields that protected Lamar, breaking several of them, but being stopped just before reaching the lich. Everyone stared at the trail of destruction it left behind, which was more than impressive enough, even if it did not one-shot the boss. The power was comparable to Puffles as Ray's dark ray had burned a clean hole through two Death Knights that their shields, that had jumped in front of Lamar in an attempt to block the attack. Chapter 853 Spring of Darkness. Colossal Dungeon, the Crypts. Has the miasma become clearer? Lydia asked Mike beside her. The two anthropomorphic beasts had been fighting side by side, swinging bats and swords respectively. In a short pause, before they wanted to run up to the next elite who was surviving Jess's ocean of fire, Lydia noticed a change in the environment. The darkness that had been impenetrable, even with night vision skills, had mostly cleared up. She felt like she was now able to see almost the full extent of the crypts. The negative status effect of the miasma's encroachment had also stopped worsening. Does that mean Seth is already done? Mike asked, surprised. Although the people of Minas Mar had gone all out to try and beat the blacksmith, it seemed like they were no match for him. However, when they turned to the passive stone coffin on the podium, the boss had not vanished yet. The colossal skeleton in dark robes was still bent over the edge of its own coffin, burning like a torch. Their thoughts were interrupted by the buzzing of wings. Why did you guys stop? Are you tired already? Jess asked, breathing heavily. The fur mage of drenched in sweat, but on a brave expression, trying her best not to look tired. Are you okay, Jess? Lydia asked, a little worried. I'm totally fine. She ran out of mana potions a while ago. James popped her confident act like a balloon. Even when the fire mage had been laughing all the time as she took her revenge and made it look easy, she was on her last leg. Well, in that case, it's good that it seems like Seth is going to finish soon. Look at the surroundings, the miasma is almost cleared, Lydia explained why they came to a stop. Oh, now that you mention it. You are right, James said with a mixed expression. It was good that they were out of the hot water, but it also meant that they were going to lose the bet. Yet, a smile grew on his face when his eyes stayed on the tired Jess. They had survived. They had become strong. They were even able to contribute on such a large scale. There was really nothing to feel bad about in this situation. No need to be depressed. Here, take some of my mana potions. Let's clean up quickly, maybe we can finish before Seth is done, Lydia suddenly said, and handed Jess a bunch of potions. You can have some of mine, too, Mike added another stack of potions. The two were currently acting as vanguard, so they didn't need as much mana to keep on fighting, as a mage did. Maybe find Azul and share with her, too. I will. Jess said, suddenly back in high spirits. James could only smile wryly. He had just come to terms with the bet being lost, then Lydia suddenly did that. Fine, let's go them. Good luck you two. The couple split up again. Hee, I did it, Evie laughed to herself behind Mina and Lixis. You have been doing something on your own for a while now, Evie. What did you do? Mina asked, curious in between casting magic. Yeah, what have you been doing while we were busy with pest control? Lixis added, a little more aggressive. I worked on my comeback. That guy tried to steal my babies, now I will have him suffer the same fate, she said confidently. You mean you are going to take control of the undead? How? Lixis asked, a little confused. The miasma was the medium of control and the source of the power for the undead. I was too thick to overcome its influence, even if Evie had the divine protection of Persephone, the queen of the underworld. Have you not noticed? The miasma has been declining constantly since Seth started fighting. I have been waiting and preparing for my chance once the miasma concentration was low enough. I will end everything in one go and we will wind this bet. Are you serious? Mina asked surprised, interrupting her chant. Spring of darkness, the immortal witch called out. As if waiting for her command, lines of flowers started blooming all across the crypts. Intricate patterns created by a tuft of black daffodils created magic circuits. As they opened their blossoms, they shone in a bright blue light, reminiscent of Seth's spirit flame. Matching the flowers covering the crypt floor and pillars, the colossal undead still left standing, also shone in an aura of blue light. Whether they were fighting, or attacking, all undead suddenly stopped moving. Oh, shit, are you serious right now, Evie? Lixis couldn't hold back when seeing the scene. Ugh, maybe I went a little too far. But it worked, right, the witch acknowledged as she staggered back and forth. Lixis hurriedly supported her. The chosen of Persephone looked at her work. She had spent the last hours spreading the flowers all across the crypts, even further than Puffle's light managed to shine. Now she was flooded with the response of hundreds of new subordinates, all extremely powerful. She could feel being overwhelmed and couldn't help but let go of controlling some of the stronger ones, leading to some of the flowers and elite undead losing the blue light. Sorry, I couldn't handle taking in all of them. She pressed out as she felt her mind slip away. Her last act before losing consciousness was transporting all the undead she was able to steal into her personal space. Suddenly 90% of the undead in the crypts had vanished. Eskik screeched in despair, seeing so many of the souls under his control being stolen away. These were not just simple dungeon spans, but the actual soldier he brought to the dungeon. It didn't matter if they died, as they would be revived back home, but now they were irretrievably stolen from him. Seth looked on in surprise as suddenly most of what was left of Eskik's army vanished in thin air. He didn't need anyone to tell him that this was Evie's doing. The spirit blacksmith had felt the same energy on those flowers, as he felt from many of his skills. As the wife of Hades, Persephone's powers were bound to have a similar aura about them. Wow, this was a move I didn't expect at all. Things are working quicker than expected, Seth mentioned, since the miasma was also thinning out a lot quicker than at the start, making him suspicious of what else was happening in the dungeon. Maybe Eskik was not the last boss? You will understand that I have to hurry now, right? Seth asked with a smile, as he increased the power of the flames of Phlegethon, to the point that Eskik was on the cusp of being turned to ashes at any given moment. The only thing not touched by the fire was the Lich King's crown. This was for one simple reason: Seth really wanted to harvest it. The Colossus's whole crown was made up of necronite, the material Seth had once used to make Evie's gauntlets. It was only an epic material, but it was pretty much the best thing for necromancers. With his current knowledge and skills, just how much stronger could he make Evie, if he used it to make a whole armor set for her? With the size of the crown, Seth was even tempted to try making necromancer golems. A golem army, with each golem leading an even bigger army of undead? An exponential increase of troops, if only undead were not so unsanitary. He doubted he could make golems with the same skill to put their undead into a separate space like Evie did. Maybe if got his hand on a few liches, he shook his head, getting rid of the dangerous thoughts. Sometimes he had to ask himself whether he should do something. Necromancer golems were definitely a step too far. I think it is time to end this, he finally spoke up, seeing that the miasma had cleared out and Eskik was falling apart into big chunks of ashes. I know you won't die from this, but listen here. If you dare to come back, we are going to be running this dungeon again. At that time, I will make sure that Evie is able to take all of your minions away from you. He gave the Lich a last warning before he fell apart. But Seth did not relax yet. He stayed vigilant for any changes, since there was an irregularity with the miasma before. However, his worries were scattered when a treasure chest and the return formation appeared before Eskik's sarcophagus. This meant the dungeon was truly cleared. Chapter 854 Ray's decision. Yeah, and Ray just blew him apart on his second shot. He was incredible. Shay bragged about his friend. After the final boss was defeated and Seth's party used the transport formation to leave the dungeon, they reunited with the rest of their expedition outside. Of course, there was a big commotion about Ray's changes, but as they shared their experiences and puzzled together what had inside, they all had a great laugh together. Taking an evening they stayed in the abyss to rest and celebrate Ray becoming chosen as a saint by a god, even when the god seemed rather shady. So if Seth had kept the boss at bay. Yeah, I bet Eskik would have kept healing his minions like Lamar did. It was really annoying. Monique complained to Lydia and Mike. Looking at the mood around the campfire, Seth understood why Mina and Finn insisted on staying, insisting it was an adventurer tradition to do after a big dungeon raid. They could have just returned to Mina's Mar, but then they would have just split up to their own rooms and groups. Having a little get-together like this right after felt quite cozy. On the side, Seth checked his level. While Monique's party was barely stuck on leave 98, he and the others had managed to just climb over the hurdle to reach leave 99. Now he had 33 AP and 7 SP he could distribute. For a moment he was tempted to raise his strength to 400. With the constant improvement from the assimilation to the path, his strength had reached a whopping 379, only 21 points away from the next big round number. On that note, his dexterity stopped at 358 after the level UPS, while his willpower was now 331. However, seeing the 3 at the start of his AP, he finally jumped over his shadow and used 23 points to raise his agility to 300, before he became too buff for his own taste. Ding! Title: Sandal Warrior gained. Your agility has reached 300 points. You gained the skill Counter Charge. Ding! Title: Balanced Physique gained. All your basic attributes have reached 300 points. All basic modifiers plus 3 per point. Dazed, he looked at the 2 titles he had just received. The first one was expected, like the previous times, he had gotten a weird title with a skill upon reaching 300 points in an attribute. Active skill, Counter Charge cooldown, 20 seconds cost, 30 mana. Can be activated whenever you dodge an attack. Upon activation, your movement speed is increased by 20%. The skill description was short and easy to understand. Counter Charge actually seemed quite useful, once Seth got a habit to dodge attacks instead of tanking them. However, the bigger surprise was Balanced Physique, which actually raised his basic modifier, like his Titan Cuirass Soul Armament. A simple example of this change was his mana. Spirit Blacksmith gave him a multiplier of 10 points of mana per 1 point of intelligence. With his secondary class, this increased to 30 points of mana, and with Titan Physique and Balanced Physique, it was now 40 points of mana per 1 point in int. With 304 points in intelligence, he now has a base mana of over 12,000. This multiplier was easily comparable to an Epic Mage class. In basic multipliers he could now rival even an Epic Mage class, but only in basic multipliers. Because of other skills, an Epic Mage would easily have double or triple the amount of mana, because of class-specific mana skills. In the end, all classes had their pros and cons. Seth may not have their skills, but they usually didn't have an arsenal of legendary items, so everything was fair. At least it wasn't unfair to him. For his last 10 points, the blacksmith invested in willpower, bringing it to a base value of 341. He had deliberated for a moment, but decided it was the stat he would need to most in the future. Not only would it ease the burden of channeling demons for enchantments, but forging legendary materials with energy manipulation and his hammer's special function was far from easy on his mental power. Seth, can I talk with you for a moment? In private, a dark figure approached him as he was checking his status window. Curious, the bard nodded and followed Ray a little further away from the shine of the fire. What do you want to talk about? It's like this, the warlock started off, fidgeting with his fingers. I can't return with everyone, yet. There is something I have to do. It's related to your new class, isn't it? Some kind of quest? Maybe a journey to gain power or deal with complications. It's okay if you can't say it. Just make sure to keep your communication crystal close and come back when we need you. Ray started at him, perplexed. Seth spoke with absolute trust. He didn't need to know what Ray was up to. No matter what, he was suddenly going to blame him or a similar stupid cliché. And if he was really honest, he was able to act like that, because he didn't really care. He wasn't that close with Ray anyways, so if the warlock decided to run, because he suddenly felt empowered, or because he was afraid to face the scene once they returned. Since he had no stake in the outcome of this conversation, he could simply decide to trust the man. How did you know? Ray coughed, genuinely surprised and relieved. Of course, at no point had he ever suspected that Ray would leave Myanmar for whatever reason. It was pure trust and not apathy. It's the only thing that changed. What else could it be if not an attempt to become stronger or not wanting to cause a problem for us, right? Seth had read enough novels to remember some of the bullshit reasons characters came across to suddenly split from their friends, instead of talking about it with their party. On this point, Ray was a lot better since he at least tried to talk about it with Seth, even if he kept stuttering and beating around the bush. I'm glad you understand it, Ray said, visibly relieved. Sure, I will cover for you, don't worry. Just be ready to return when I call you. If you don't come then, there is no excuse I can make up for you. Afterward, they acted as if they had not spoken about anything and returned to the little celebration. It was not just to celebrate the successful dungeon raid, but it was also to prepare themselves for what they would need to face once they returned to Mina's March. It was very possible that this was the last really carefree moment they had before the business with Y-City was finished. Are you guys ready to return now? Seth asked when the commotion was slowly dying down. Yeah, let's go home, Mina purred, hugging his arm. I'm just in the right mood. Finn clung to his other arm. It didn't seem like he was getting to rest once they returned. All right, then let's go home. At his signal, everyone used home call. Everyone but Ray, who stayed back, alone in the abyss. Are you sure I can become stronger here, on my own? Of course, of course. Even stronger than receiving another legendary item or armor from Seth. Are you still there? Listen, if you become stronger, I become stronger, and then I can give you special material you can bring back to your blacksmith boss to make an item for you, deal? I'm sure Seth will like that. Alright, let's go. It was the middle of the night when the party appeared in the entrance hall of Mina's March. Hey? Where is Ray? Shay immediately noticed the absence of his friend. Calm down, Ray got a special mission from God. He spoke about it with me and I excused him for it. He will return once he finished his divine task as a saint. The bard came up with something. But why didn't he just tell us? We could have helped him. He knew you especially would say that, but he didn't want that. This is why he stayed back without telling you. Seth saw his chance and immediately shot his question down with a standard lie. We can talk about it tomorrow, I will try to answer your question then as best as I can. Seth finished the conversation quickly, seeing the gaze of the two women in his arms. But PST, you know, I would also like to have a little after-party in our room, Ellen distracted the water mage. Good going, Ellen. Seth silently gave her a thumbs up, as he left with Finn and Mina. Status. Name, Seth Smith. Mark of Ivisor. Pledge of Solace. Olympian myths, Hades, strong, Hephaestus, moderate, Apollo, weak, Eos, weak. Kin of fire. Blood of the inventor. Call of the maestro. Blessing, Hades, Hephaestos, Seth, Apollo, Eos. Title, faster than the thought. Level, 99. EXP, 0,00112%. Race, Orihuma. Sex, male. Age, 25. Class, Spirit Blacksmith, Unique, / Infernal Scald, Unique. Affiliation, System Church, Myanmar. Health, 1000/1000. Mana, 235 plus 6300, INTX 40. Strength 379, plus 75. Dexterity 358, plus 75. Agility, 300, plus 75. Intelligence 304, plus 75. Willpower 341, plus 75, plus 615 items. Endurance 318, plus 75. Personality, 157, 58 plus 30, plus 50. Luck 143, 50 plus 15 plus 2. Free AP, Attribute points 0. Universal AP 8. Free SP, Skill points 7. Defense. Physical, 2316, 1897 plus 50 plus 325 plus 44, ENDX 7. Magical, 1117, 924 plus 25 plus 150 plus 18, WILX 4. Fire immunity. Earth resistance, 65%. Light resistance, 35%. Wind resistance, 15%. Water resistance, 13%. Poison resistance, 25%. Frost resistance, 10%. Resistance to mental attacks, 10%. 25% resistance to diseases. Chapter 855 Struggling Past. Level 99, naked, hardly awake. Struggling past the two sleeping ladies, he left the bed, because someone was energetically knocking at the door of their quarters. He grabbed a random towel to cover his nether regions before opening the door. Seth. Lena was about to aggressively call his name when she let out a squeal of surprise and shock. What's with that reaction? I'm presentable, you know, the grumpy blacksmith pointing at his improvised loincloth about the size of a washcloth and barely creating the illusion of decency. Only afterward he realized that Lena's eyes were glued to his muscles, which had become more defined thanks to his increase in strength, without being bulky thanks to his balanced physique. You like what you see, he teased her, playing with his muscles using flex. No. What are you saying? I came to talk about something important with you. Right, what was it again? She stuttered, startled. Cover yourself already, this is important. There was a change with the creatures from Y City, her face was beet red, from embarrassment and anger at the same time. Still chuckling, Seth equipped a simple shirt and sweatpants to hide his true power. Finally being able to concentrate, Lena explained to Seth what happened during their absence, the attack on TS8, the change in the attackers, and their idea to ask the demons for help. Especially the weirdly well-informed Ember who had been staying at the embassy since her arrival, to have a talk with Seth. The blacksmith could only sigh. Just when he dealt with the worry about his future path and could trust the power of his friends, those guys dared to start adapting and overcoming. Hearing Cromwell's explanation from Lena, it seemed to have been only a matter of time. He could have seen it coming. What he did not see coming was for Mary and Lena to get the demons involved. Hearing that the demons had a way even Seth had not heard about while studying at the college irked him, but it was also a relief to have another option after his own ideas were only semi-successful. The bard had also tried thinking of a solution for those who had grown stronger, like Cromwell, or even their minions. He even gave the researcher the whimsical curse to test it on Dragos. Seth's was to put it on the leader of the scene, once he found him, and watch him writhe in agony as the item ate his soul. However, the curse of binding had failed once the necklace beheaded Dragos through necrosis. After the necklace fell off, what was left of the man regenerated something akin to a head. That was how Cromwell described it at least. Now it was up to Cromwell and the demons. Some kind of biological warfare tailored to people who received the serum would have been Seth's preferred solution. Using the golems to bomb all of Y City with toxic gas sounded like overkill but would be a quick solution to their problem. At least the hanging tree was working like a charm. It sounded like the born nemesis for human wave tactics, even if the humans in this case were immortal, doped, and tortured to insanity. It was better not to think about them like that. As tragic as their fate was, ending it was probably the best they could do for them. Is Karina okay? The blacksmith asked. He knew that the dryad was a kind soul. Don't worry, she seems even more motivated. TS9 is almost finished already, Lena calmed his worries. Instead I need to meet with Ember. She had been waiting for days in the embassy. Now? Seth exclaimed. He had returned just yesterday and had crawled out of bed moments ago. He didn't have breakfast yet, not to mention that he could take a shower or even brush his teeth before someone almost broke down his door. It's already noon, fine, you have half an hour, the princess said scrutinizing. You know I am the tower master, right? He squinted at her. Oh, please. Fire me then, at least I can relax then, she provoked him. Seth sighed, good administrative personnel was hard to get. Mary would be really angry at him if he chased out Lena and effectively doubled her workload again. Fine, I will come up in half an hour. The blacksmith could be seen moments later, chowing down on a table full of food. At one moment there was a tower master making food vanish like it was a magic trick, and in the next Seth was gone, only leaving an empty table. He had teleported to the elevator that brought him directly to the embassy above. Since Mary and Lena both insisted that he had to come, he didn't dawdle. As for his personal hygiene, he did brush his teeth, but he used lifestyle magic to become clean, instead of taking a shower. Shortly after his arrival, the two women ushered him into his office, without much of a greeting. Inside was Ember, his only other closer demon acquaintance apart from Tunomol. He had met her at the Bard College and she had helped him meet her uncle Chard and Tunomol. He had also made a flute for her in return. Hey, Seth. Long time no see, she greeted with an ambiguous grin. He didn't know if it was a threat or amusement. You could have contacted me at least once, you know. It was a threat. After nagging at him, that he was bad at keeping in contact with people, which was objectively true but not necessarily bothered him personally, the conversation turned to business. Surprisingly, she had not forgotten about it over nagging at her friend for not contacting her. I heard the demons have a solution for our problem? And all you want in exchange in a nice cozy place in Minas Mar, he asked to make sure he had understood Lena's summary correctly. Right, things in Delta are turning for the worse and the college isn't unaffected either. Among the newcomers is a powerful demonic bard, Galvin, who joined the college. He managed to sway a lot of students and even some of the professors to join the hardliners. They are using the current state of Delta to instigate public sentiment. That is why the dean wants to talk with you about a way for us to migrate to Minas Mar, instead of seeking open confrontation with our brethren. She said it all without taking a single breath, as if she had memorized it and feared missing a point if she didn't finish it all in one go. Seth had not expected that the demons would also have problems with how Delta was currently led. Delta had not encroached on the demons before or seriously tried to restrain them, but maybe that had changed in the meantime. With how the district was currently operating, becoming more and more similar to how Y City did things, it was only a question of time before one side made a move. Maybe Delta had already become a powder keg, while Seth had looked away for a moment. When you call them hardliners, you mean? Seth asked carefully. Demon supremacists. Demon supremacists was the nice term for demons that looked down on any life forms but demons, and even among demons, they looked for a strict hierarchy. This was the kind of ideology that was easy to grow among an unsatisfied populace, as they had ample ways to give people someone to blame. The problem with that was that they were usually the guys that would start a war or demonic invasions on other worlds, usually following a powerful leader. Another worry for the future, so to say. Okay, I will meet that elder of yours. Chapter 856 Swear It. Cinema Dimension. A massive hand, hard like iron and rough like a rasp, suddenly grasped Seth's neck, and eyes that burned like the embers of the first flame fixated the god of chaos. Swear it, Hephaestus commanded, unexpectedly irritated. What? Seth asked, surprised as the hand pressure grew like a vice. Swear that this is not one of your avatar shenanigans again. You are trying to change his path before he starts leveling, right? The bearded got through at him. Genuine indignation was seen on Seth's face. I am appalled that you think I could do something like this, he said, hurt. Zip it. You already did something like this. Swear it. On your divinity. Seth glanced to the other gods, looking for help, but nobody stood up for him. Why would they? Nobody believed his acting, and Hephaestus was absolutely right. I swear to it, I have no hand in this. Happy, the god finally gave in. But Hephaestus still eyed him suspiciously. Let it go, Hephaestus. It's really not Seth's doing. The system god finally said. Why didn't you say that earlier? Seth asked, offended. It was fun watching, the system god said with a shrug. Now, shush, I want to watch this. Delta. Begrudgingly, the blacksmith didn't have any time to rest. He made himself presentable, and an hour after his conversation with Ember, the two arrived at the college. It had been a while since Seth returned to the college. Usually, he only showed his face around when he needed to look for new or specific ballads, which didn't happen often lately. The moment he stepped onto the campus, he could feel the change in atmosphere. After making things clear during the flighting, most other students had turned to ignore him, intimidated. Now, he could feel many pairs of eyes on him, and they dared to look at him with hostility. Seems like things really changed. People forgot the lesson I taught them. Now, it wasn't like Seth enjoyed being feared or ignored, but people looking at him with hostility for no good reason rubbed him the wrong way. Compared to that, the other two options were better. Don't mind them, we have to go meet Dean Remington, Ember told him. However, the other students seemed to have a different idea. When the two wanted to enter the main complex, a group of demons barred their path. Ember, so it is true, that you and Dean Remington asked humans for help. Pathetic. What a disgrace. Guys, doesn't he look familiar? Shut up, Will. What an utter embarrassment you are, Ember. Seemed like only one of them had a brain, but he was unfortunately silenced by group dynamics. Seth suddenly had an idea. Maybe they didn't know who they were stopping because of his helmet and new armor? It was good, then they wouldn't know who hit them. Had he never heard them speak their opinions, he may have been able to ignore them. They may not have uttered them if they knew who he was. But now it was too late. He had heard it and there was no forgiving it easily. The group suddenly froze in fear and fell silent, when the pressure of dragon might descended on them. They were just wee little bards, still learning the crafts. There was nothing they could do when Seth lightly flexed the muscles of his armor. It's great you are already standing in rows. Seth wound up and 5 distinct claps echoed across the campus, as he slapped the 5 standing closest to him with his flat hand. The 5 fell like dominoes in the direction of the slap. They had been caught in a stupor and unable to even react to their fall. Several claps later, the path was open. Didn't you go a little overboard? Ember asked conflicted, as they stepped over the moaning bodies of her bullies. After what they said about you. I think a good slap and a dislocated jaw here and there is quite light. If I was serious, they wouldn't be this loud, he answered with a shrug. After seeing the Dark Knight slap the daylights out of the group of delinquents, nobody dared to look at him unruly anymore as he followed Ember further into the building. She led Seth to the annex where the professors had their offices, but on their way they found many of the doors standing ajar, the offices empty. Oh, no. This doesn't look good, Ember exclaimed as she ran to the office of Dean Remington. This door was open, too, the room behind in disarray. Ember, what is going on? This doesn't seem like they are gone holding classes, Seth asked when he caught up to the panicking demon girl. We have to hurry. If what I think is correct, then Galvin finally crossed the line and challenged the dean and the other teachers to a fighting. We have to go to the arena, quick, she said in a hurry and took off. Then maybe the bullies and crowd outside were just a distraction to stop Ember? However, seeing her in such a panic upon finding the teachers might be in trouble, Seth found this behavior a little suspicious. That was if the dean was just a teacher to her. Ember, who is this elder for you to panic like this? Seth asked, running beside her. We can't talk about it at college, but he's my grandfather. Enough talking, we have to hurry, she said, already gasping for air. Is it the same arena I was last time? The blacksmith asked. Seeing her nod, he decisively grabbed her and put her on his back as he sped up toward the inner courtyard where the fighting arena was located. The commotion was audible from far away and they found a big crowd surrounding the fight ring. Loud music was overpowering the crowd's chatter as 2 demonic songs fought for supremacy. Seth used force to move towards the ring, not minding people's reactions. Despite hurrying, they came too late. By the time Seth and Ember arrived at the ring, an elderly-looking demon with similarly orange skin as Ember was already lying on the ground, blood dripping from his orifices. Look at him, his voice quiet, his rhymes weak. This was the man you relied on? No wonder all of you are so soft. This will change. Once I made an example out of the dissidents. A tall demon stood opposite the man in the ring. It was a gaunt demon, with bright red skin and a spider-like skull. He had 2 pairs of eyes and no lips. In his claws, he held a dark lute and there was a glint of insanity in his eyes when he saw Seth and Ember approach. Grandfather! Ember cried out as she rushed onto the ring. Other teachers had already reached the old man, treating him. However, they were in a similar state as the elder. The dean was obviously not the first match of the day. You finally appeared. It's the whore who mingles with humans and her human plaything. Galvin blared out towards the crowd. A sudden fire lance had him dodge to the side. Mind your words, guitar picker. I'm a faithful man to my 2 girlfriends and never slept with Ember, he corrected the demon, as he also climbed onto the arena floor. You dare, the demons exclaimed, but was ignored. Teacher, how did this happen? He asked Ember and the group surrounding the elder. Galvin somehow found out about the scroll and our plans. Officially, he used our plan to split the college into 2 campuses and move the one focused on music to Minas Mar to refer to the old rules of fighting. A duel to solve the dispute. We sorely underestimated his power, and now the dean is. The Mantis teacher Seth knew from singing lessons explained distressed. What about him? He's completely fine. Seth asked confused, the old man was already completely healed. While they were talking, Seth had already used the superior heal from his golden fleece to recover his injuries. All the dean was unconscious. Thank you, Seth, Ember thanked him, while the other looked surprised at the elder who was asleep, but otherwise unharmed. Human! Are you trying to get involved in demon business? The demon hissed. What demon business? You call your prancing around like a monkey demon business, he hollered. The crowd booed, but Seth stepped up confidently. Was it his business? Obviously, it was. Ember was a friend and her grandfather offered him a way to get rid of the scene. How could it not be his business? I just have to beat him before we can come to an agreement, right? The blacksmith asked the mantis teacher, pointing his thumb at Galvin. Haha, you? Beat me? Even if there is nothing impressive about you, your ignorance is astounding. Galvin cackled. Seth ignored the weak taunt. So, do you agree to stay out of this if I beat you in a duel? Seth asked disinterestedly. Haha, even if it only to see the despair on their faces as I crush their last hope, yes. I shall face this human according to the old traditions of demon poetry and show you all that we are superior. The crowd broke out in cheers at his words. Great, then sign here please, Seth just said, as a soul contract appeared in his hand with a jet of flames. His soul trade was Leave 4 and he was now able to materialize simply contracts based on this kind of conversation. What? Now this is demon business. Chapter 857 Deal with it from the start. What? Galvin asked confused, having a hard time grasping what was happening. A human suddenly materializing a soul contract was too far out there for him to comprehend quickly. The crowd had also fallen silent, seeing Seth whip out a soul contract. A soul contract, so you pesky bugger won't come whining to me afterward or keep getting on my nerves later on, Seth explained nonchalantly. He knew this kind of character. Galvin was that annoying fly that would keep getting in their way if he didn't deal with him from the start. That was why he wanted to give him a chance, and when he still decided to bother Seth, the blacksmith would get his soul. Seth was not afraid of losing. He didn't intend to, but in case he did, he simply left out any consequences for the case of his loss. It was the typical if you lose, I win, if I win contract. Humph. Fine, Galvin said and signed the contract after checking for any fine prints. Despite thinking there was a trap, at no point did it come to the arrogant bard's mind to add a condition for Seth's loss. It seemed that he was too caught up in his vision of making an example out of the blacksmith and the others. Having come to an agreement, they prepared the traditional match. Unlike modern fighting that involved fighting in addition to taunting and poetry, traditional fighting was only done through demonic music, like a magic duel. They would also need to follow a theme for their battle, which was chosen through a ritual. Their lyrics and melodies had to be improvised on the spot. This was the only part Seth was not 100% confident in. He had trained the production side and the practical side pf his bardic skill, but not the poetic side. The bard could only trust his skill and items. Don't worry, if you need help, I'm here. Ounce, the demonic lyre in his hands assured. Right, he had a powerful demon lyre on his side and a legendary armor blessed with divine and demonic music talents. What was there to fear? He had decided against using the anvil or the wheel fiddle, since he didn't intend to kill the audience, yet. He was confident that he could suppress the whole crowd with force, if he wanted to, so losing meant little to him. The bard only played along, because beating Galvin was the more satisfying method to end this situation and had the least consequences. I will now activate the theme, the referee announced before mumbling cryptic phrases over the magic circle. Sparks of light rose from the circle and started shaping a word. Critique, disparage your opponent. Kakikak, my favorite theme, the gaunt demon cheered and jumped from joy. A coin was tossed to see who would begin, making Galvin even happier as he got the right to start. Seth lifted Ounce and awaited the signal to start, bracing himself for what Galvin would do. In most cases, it would have been common sense that going second would be more advantageous, but in a duel of demonic music, it was easier to build up power and momentum by going first. And what momentum he was building! With the strum of his lute, Galvin multiplied, as if his body went through a prism. There were two copies of him with a slightly shifted color scheme. The three started singing in sync while his lute played a dark, somber tune. By the power of Baal. Mot, Rot, Morzan, Noida. Zokth, Turgoth, Tanak, Vonath. Sorak, Zelkat, Tigmu, Wadajet. Amagon. Ark. Shmu. Drogdog. Salgut. Mokgut, Turuk, Verith. With every demon they named, the atmosphere in the courtyard darkened. Galvin called upon so many demons, that Seth knew only a few of them. Even if he didn't know their names, he could feel the pressure on the arena rising. He understood why the faculty members buckled. As you see, I have friends in high places, with the power to put you on the run. Well, forgive us these smiles on our faces. I'll show you what true power is, that will be fun. Sun. Dark, toxic smoke filled the stage, and demon faces appeared in the darkness that filled the courtyard, even shocking the audience. The three Galvins kept dancing, as they were accompanied by a piece of dark music from the shadows. They kept appearing and singing from the dense fog. You're playing with the big boys now. Playing with the big boys now. Every chord and gesture tells you who's the best. You're playing with the big boys now. The three kept growing in size, every word with booming power, and every step of their dance shook the arena. It was clear that the demon tried to use overwhelming might to beat his opponent. The tremors made it hard for even the audience to stay on their feet, yet, Seth stood there unimpressed. He was more interested in how Galvin endured the backlash from the damage his armor reflected. You're playing with the big boys now. You're playing with the big boys now. Stop this foolish session. Watch a true musician give an exhibition how. Now pick up your ears, boy. You're playing with the big boys now. As the verse ended and he paused, the demonic faces started singing their names in a choir of wrathful souls. Suddenly, a warm and upbeat melody crashed into the grim scenery, and the dark fog was invaded by a crimson hue. The bard had decided that now was the best time to interject. When Seth's voice rose, empowered by the voice of Seth, it was oozing with spite and derision. I must admit, your parlor tricks are amusing. I bet you've got a granny writing your text. Now here's your chance to get the best of me, hope your hand is hot. C'mon, clown, show me what you got. A sequence of notes revealed the three copies hiding in the fog with shocked impressions. Seth could feel the power of Apollo's poetry and inspiration of Phoenix flow through him, but he also felt another, foreign, power strengthening his play. You tried to slam me with your hardest stuff. But your triple whammy wasn't up to snuff. I'll set the record straight. You're simply out of date. You're only second rate. Seth didn't move, but the crimson power of his song was predating on the demonic face, spaghettifying and absorbing them, as Seth's song swelled on and his image seemed to grow, while Galvin was forced to step back. Galvin opted for force, but Seth chose a psychic attack. You think your song's a meanie, but your texts are tame. You've got a lot to learn about the skaldic game. So for your education, I'll reiterate. You're only second rate. Tendrils of dark crimson power were grasping for Galvin and his copies, but he didn't back down, as the notes of his lute reinforced the dark somber melody of his shadow realm and they belched out their song, trying to drown out the fun tune of the demonic lyre. You're playing with the big boys now. You're playing with the big boys now. By the might of person, you will kneel before us. Kneel to our symphonic power. As his phrases grew quicker and stronger, his shadow realm regained its standing against Seth's crimson tendrils and the chanting demon faces reappeared. His pompous piece grew, trying to overpower Seth's jazzy tune. However, it was not enough to stop the infernal skald. You will cower at the power. In my pinky. My skill is number 1. On every list. But if you're not convinced that I'm invincible, put me to the test. I'd love to lay this rivalry to rest. Go ahead and zap me with the big surprise. Snap me in a trap. Cut me down to size. I'll make a big escape. It's just a piece of cake. You're only second rate. The forces were now competing almost equally, but Galvin strengthened once more as he released his clones. You put up a front, you put up a fight. And just to show I feel no spite, you can be my acolyte. But first, boy, it's time to bow. Bow down. Or it's your own grave you'll dig, boy, your own grave you'll dig, boy. You're playing with the big boys now. Playing with the big boys. Now. His singing had become quicker and quicker, building up to a tremendous blow. With his last word, the whole of the realm of darkness and demonic figure Galvin built up rushed against Seth, pulverizing the arena floor, and enveloping the blacksmith into a dark cocoon, trying to crush him. Blood splattered on the ground, as the feedback hit Galvin. The demon had obviously chosen wrong, trying to use force on Seth, but how could he have known the power of his armor? His lute fell out of his bloody hands. His energy was spent and he had no reserves to keep going with his song. Galvin had called upon as many patrons as possible to quickly build up strength and thus exhausted himself. Seth had no need to rush things and played an open radio station. He had been broadcasting since the beginning without someone specific in mind. Now, as he intended to deliver the finishing blow, the foreign power he had felt before swelled on, giving him another slew of inspiration. You know, your hocus pocus isn't tough enough. And your mumbo jumbo doesn't measure up. Let me pontificate upon your sorry state. You're only second rate. With nothing in its way to stop it, Seth's music wormed its way into the demon's brain, planting visions into his head as the skald kept singing faster and faster, channeling malicious power directly into the song. I can hardly wait to discombobulate your brain and leave you with the mind of an invertebrate. You'll make a better living with a spinning plate. You're only second rate. Chapter 858. An option not thought of. No spectacular fireworks, no big explosion, or a grand finale. Seth's song simply came to an end with Galvin falling over, unconscious. The blacksmith was the irrefutable winner of the match, yet it was Seth who had a cold shiver run down his spine. The bard had realized where the power to discombobulate Galvin's brain came from. It resembled the power of the time when he enchanted the marvelous, magnificent, mad Yatagan Mim. At this point, Seth was sure it was Shock, the demon of malevolent humor who had supported him on this gig. He couldn't help the cold sweat on his skin, despite nothing happening to him this time. The fact that Shock already appeared at least twice without Seth trying to call for him, meant that he had his eyes on the bard. Remembering the stories the professor had told him, the feeling of burning alive in the presence of beans, or the urge to do the deed with any living creature one sees. Realizing that Shock had helped him, was like he survived the encounter with a terrifying predator. Seth. Thank you. Ember's voice brought him back to the present. While the blacksmith had been caught in his own thought, he had been officially announced the winner. Seeing him not react, Ember approached him. Are you okay? She added when Seth stayed silent. Get it together, man. You won, don't get hung up on this matter, Ounce told him. Although Seth refused to forget about Shock's presence, the liar was right, he couldn't get hung up about it. He had just won the right to a deal he didn't even know the details of. It was time to see what exactly he even won in this match, except for Ember's gratitude of course. I'm fine, thanks for asking. How's your grandfather? He asked her with a smile. Grandfather woke up during your fight, she answered happily. Things had turned better for Ember and his potential allies, however, Seth could feel the angry gazes from the majority of the crowd. The poor, misguided suckers that had bought into Galvin's bullshit had not been discouraged by Seth's show of overwhelming power. Nobody dared say it out loud but could hear their whispers. He had to have cheated. There was no way a human could beat a demonic bard like this. Excuses for why their great hero lost so pathetically, none of them could accept that Galvin was just second-rate. Then let's go talk with your grandfather. Unless of course there are more people asking for a beating. He called out the last part, his eyes wandering over the crowd, to see whether there was anybody dumb enough to stand up for their opinion. Seth was surprised, not. Nobody had the gall to step up, so he left the arena with Ember to meet her grandfather. I'm Dean Rep at Remington, thank you for your help. I'm glad that I finally have the chance to meet you in person. Ember told me a lot about you and mine. Asmar, the elder demon, greeted him. The group moved to the dean's office, for a private talk away from the crowd and some refreshing tea. During the conversation, Seth found out that the dean had only recently returned to the college, finding that the situation in Delta and their society had tremendously worsened. He explained once again that lately, foreign demons had started migrating here, abusing their treaty with Krina and Delta as a means to infiltrate. The structure of their society was complex and there was no absolute leadership, however, public sentiment was turned against their human neighbors. Is this also the doing of the scene? Seth mumbled, tired of that organization's shenanigans. No, it's not the scene, the dean denied, surprising Seth. You know of the scene? He asked, as he was half ready to explain who they were. I told you not to underestimate our information gathering, Ember reminded him. No, it's not Y-City behind this. They are followers of a count who managed to open a portal from his domain to the northeast of Earth, Dean Remington explained succinctly. So the gates to hell also opened on Earth? Great, just great, Seth asked, even more tired. I'm afraid so. Many of us also see this development as worrisome, especially how they find many supporters among our brethren. Delta's recent policies and their attempt to take influence on our society were not appreciated and pushed many to that side. We do not wish to get into conflict with our own brothers or the natives, which is why we wish to migrate to Minas March. We have heard that you offered autonomy to the tree stations and are looking for people that could protect the populace in case of an emergency in your conflict with Y City. You really know an awful lot, Seth commented, and the old demon only nodded. This is why we wanted to prepare a gift to offer to you. This was also the reason Galvin suddenly challenged us to a duel when he found out about it. Dean Remington brought out a scroll. Looking like ancient parchment, it possessed a powerful aura despite its fragile appearance. In addition to moving the musical branch to Minas Mar, we also intended to give you full access to our library and this to help you in your fight with Y City. It is a family heirloom and recently recovered from one of our old residences. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate your intentions, but how will access to the library and this scroll help me? The blacksmith asked, confused. The library will offer only supplementary knowledge. What is important is the scroll. It's not a simple skill scroll, but an inheritance scroll, created by one of our ancestors. This kind of scroll is created when a demon is about to die and they seal part of their soul in the scroll for their descendants to inherit it. I heard from Ember that you also work with souls, so you should know how difficult it is to split off a specific part of a soul while keeping the knowledge and properties intact. Not just is it risky, but it also means for the maker to lose this ability. There are only a few demons that are born with this gift, making this inheritance scroll that much more valuable. You were looking for a way to defeat the abominable immortal creature that they have bred in Y City. This power will help you, he said, and gave Seth the scroll after hyping it up. The bard's eyes flared up when he soon understood what the demon was talking about. It was an option Seth had not thought of before, but this was definitely going to work. Looking down at one of the hanging tree growing in a valley, was a young couple. A small child was playing in the snow behind them. These things really pop up everywhere like mushrooms, but somehow the air starts smelling nostalgic, the man said, scratching his horn. I get what you mean, Tearlatch. Do you think we should look for a place to settle down now? The beautiful woman asked in a dreamy voice. You are right, Uno. I think it will be better for him if we settle in a place until he is older. Then we can travel and show him this world, he agreed with her, smiling. But those things might get a little annoying, she said and pointed across the valley. Following her pointing finger, Tearlatch saw an army of creatures. They looked human, but something about them made them look more like empty shells. The lights were on, but nobody was home. Should we get rid of them? He asked her, tilting his head questioning. We? Do you need my help? I think you can do it alone. I will take care of Ailby, while you are gone. Tearlatch looked at his wife, who readily sent him into danger and only had eyes for their new son. He felt a little abandoned. But what could he do? It wasn't like he couldn't understand her. All right, I will be back in a moment. Chapter 859 Down the Rabbit Hole. 2 weeks later, Epsilon. She woke up from her light sleep when someone started tucking her in her thin blanket. Mom? What are you doing? She mumbled sleepily. Her heavy eyelids fought against the sleepiness. Hush, my little moon pie, we have to leave now, her mother whispered, holding her in her arms. Are we going back home? Can we see Dad again? She asked her mother, still half asleep. She missed her dad and their old home. Someday her father didn't come back and her mom had told her that they had to leave their home. She missed her warm bed and her friends. She had tried to make new friends in this place, but there were not a lot of children her age here. Her mom halted for a moment at her. Her eyes seemed big and watery. Was she sad? Mom. I'm sorry, Moon Pie. We probably won't see your dad again, but the place we are going to will be a lot better than here. I bet you will be able to make friends there, her mom said, her voice shaking. She hugged her mother tightly, she didn't know what else to do. Her mother embraced her tightly as she carried her out. Looking over her mom's shoulder, she saw many more people on the street. She was surprised that there had been so many people here. She never saw so many people when she went out, not that she was allowed to go out often. Mom said the streets were dangerous. Mom said there were not as many brave people as her dad who fought the mean monsters, so she had to hide at home. She hugged her mother even tighter when she thought of her dad. He had been gone for a long while now and she started to doubt whether she would see him again. Sherry, there you are. Follow me, a man stepped out from the crowd and approached her mother. Her mother turned to him so she couldn't see his face, but she recognized the voice of an uncle who worked with her dad. Hello, Uncle Kale. Mom said we are going to a better place. Is it true I can find friends there? She asked excitedly. He stepped closer and ruffled her hair with a quiet laugh. Of course, I'm sure you will find many friends, once we got out of here, she assured her with a warm smile. Carrying her in her arms, her mom followed Uncle Kale to the front of the crowd. The uncle and a group of other people led them through the dark streets of Y City. At first, she was still able to see the silhouettes of the empty and deserted building, but soon the light from the streetlights vanished. In this place, there was only the light of the stars. Staring into the darkness, her skin crawled, as she imagined the scary monsters appearing in the darkness. She instinctively knew that they had entered the place her mom had always warned her about. The buildings she saw in the twilight were broken and ruined, and debris littered the roads. Apart from the labored breaths of her mom, and the people in the shadows around them, there were no sounds. Mom, I don't like it here. Moon Pie. Everything will be all right. Don't worry, Uncle Kale will protect us, her mother whispered in her ears and pet her head. Despite her words, she felt her mother grasp her more tightly. She didn't know how long they spent in this darkness, but at some point, her mother became slower. Sherry, over here. Climb down here, someone will receive down there, they will guide you and the others for the rest of the way, the uncle explained in a hushed voice. Hold on tightly, Moon Pie, her mother said, and she hugged her mother's neck tightly, as the woman climbed down a ladder into a hole. The air blowing from below was cold and damp. It smelled of stone and a little like a toilet. Her arms started getting tired, but soon a warm light appeared from below. It's okay now, Moon Pie. We reached the bottom, her mother whispered as a group of people received them. Finally, her mother put her down but still held her hand. Please come this way. You can sit down and eat something, while we are waiting for the rest of the group, a beautiful lady told her mother. Her bright hair shone strongly in the golden shine of the lamps. She gave her mother 2 steaming boxes. Her mother sat down and beckoned for her to sit on her lap. Come here, Coralie. Do you want to eat something? Her mother asked with a caring smile. Sitting on her lap, the smell of the food in the boxes snuck in her nose. Only now, did she notice how hungry she was. Her stomach roared and she looked up to her mother, conflicted. They didn't have much to eat since her dad didn't come back and they left their home, but she didn't dare to complain. She knew her mom ate even less than her. It's okay, Moon Pie. We will share, she said and pressed her warm, soft lips on her forehead. She smiled happily and nodded. Her mother opened a box and started feeding her with a spoon. It was warm rice and sauce and veggies and a bit of meat. She had never eaten something like this, but the warmth of the food flooded her body and it tasted really great. Mom, you eat it, too. It's really good, she said excitedly. Her mother tried to feed her, but she refused until her mother also tasted a spoonful. She felt satisfied, seeing her mother's surprised face. Okay, how about we take turns? 1 spoon for you, 1 for Mom, okay, her mother offered a deal and she accepted happily, sharing the 2 boxes of food with her mother until the rest of the people had come down and also started eating their food. How about a little dessert for the little princess? The beautiful lady had returned, offering a muffin to her. It was big and dark, and the delicious smell of chocolate wafted into her nose, making her mouth water. It had been really long since she had chocolate. See, can I share it with my mom? She asked reluctantly. The lady answered with a hearty laugh. Of course, but I could also give you a second one for you, Mom. How about that? She asked and offered her a second one. She happily accepted and proudly offered one to her mother, who had watched the whole thing with a calm smile. Thank you, she also thanked the beautiful lady. After eating something, Uncle Kale stood up and explained something. We have cleared a way to escape through the underground. Please follow the guide with the light and stay as quiet as possible, and please stay close together. At the halfway point we will be entering the old subway tunnels before leaving the district. It's a long path to walk, I can only ask you to endure until we are in safety. She didn't understand a lot of Uncle Kale's talk, but soon after, her mother picked her up again and they all started walking through an even darker darkness than the city by night. Only the people carrying lanterns allowed her to see where they were walking. After a while, the labored breath of her mother set in again. Mom, I can walk on my own, she whispered worriedly. Her mom didn't have a cool class and superpower like her dad, but her food was the bestest, almost as good as the lunch boxes the nice lady gave them. Don't worry, Moon Pie. Mom is okay, her mother said, clenching onto her tightly, making it clear she wouldn't let go of her. Her worries were appeased when the guides said to take a break and her mother could finally sit down. They walked for a really long time. So long she couldn't resist her sleepiness and fell asleep somewhere in the middle. When she woke up again, the surroundings had changed. The light of the lanterns illuminated a tunnel covered in roots. She felt like she was in a fairy tale. Had her mother jumped into a rabbit hole while she was asleep? She wondered at the sight. "Did I wake you up, Moon Pie?" she heard her mother whisper right beside her ear. "Where are we, Mom?" she asked curiously. "We are almost at the place I told you about," she answered. Her mother didn't lie. Soon they saw light from the tunnel ahead. Cool fresh air was blowing in her face as she was carried up a staircase of wood. The bright light of the day blinded her for a moment after staying so long in darkness. When she could finally see again, she saw an emerald ocean in the sky. A sea of leaves swayed in the wind. It was her first time seeing such a huge tree. It was her first time seeing a real tree apart from books and TV. When she finally managed to take her eyes off the brilliant crown, her eyes were caught again by the green city before them. She could not help but smile in awe. It was really like in a fantasy. There were even houses made of trees and roads made of roots. "Do you like it?" The beautiful lady appeared beside them and asked. "A lot," she exclaimed excitedly. Chapter 860 Night and Fog Operation. 1 week later, Ypsilon. "Pretty foggy today," the guard mentioned as he greeted his colleague to change shifts. A thick fog was surrounding the facility this evening. "Yeah, it started roughly an hour ago. You don't think it's those guys, right?" "My skin always starts crawling when one of them visits," his colleague said worriedly. He got up from his seat in the little guardhouse to open the door for the night shift guy. "Now, why would they come to the collection facility in the boonies?" "What's the trucks for?" he said with a laugh as he was about to enter the guardhouse. Suddenly, the massive billowing fog rushed into the guardhouse, enveloping the two guards. Moments later both fell to the ground, their mouths frothing with white foam. The mist then congregated to take the shape of a man. Finally, standing in the guardhouse, was Mistopheles, the mist demon. "Is it clear now?" From the darkness, a beautiful silver face appeared and asked. Jonah, wearing a black outfit combined with dark leather leg and arm guard, stepped out from the darkness. Except for the mask, everything else was hard to make out in the night, making him look like a floating face. "Yes. Since we got them during shift change, there won't be any problem for the next few hours. Looking at their schedule, there are no deliveries planned tonight." At his signal, the rest of Team 4 stepped out from the darkness. Dohu, Ellen, Archer, Shay, and Beamont were all wearing nice new items, not all of them in armor. Similar to Jonah, Archer was also wearing a mix of fabric, leather, and armor. This change in equipment was all thanks to Nico Booz, who was finally promoted to the tier of Tailor Master. After being supported by Puffles with the best materials he could ask for, his skill finally broke through after months of grinding. But this was not all. His original class of Spellweaver had also grown stronger since they had forced him to accompany the Oath Guards on dungeon raids. The gimmick of a Spellweaver was the ability to create special fabric from magic spells they had learned. As such, the class and the fabrics he was able to make grew with his level and magic capabilities. Thanks to this, his best pieces were finally rated as relic rated and some of his armors became worthy for the field teams to wear. Although Seth could technically make leather and cloth armor, too, since he had sewing and could cheat a little with energy manipulation and his hammer, he did not get the same bonus as a tailor, nor could he imitate the special techniques tailors could use to imbue effects to their works. Begrudgingly, Seth had to admit that no matter how light a plate armor was, it was cumbersome to move in, and not every class was fit to become an immovable turret like a caster. If it had to be leather or cloth, he had to leave the stage to Nico Booz, Puffle's unofficial disciple. "Good, how many guards did you find?" the vampiric swordsman asked. 25 adventurers between Leave 50 and Leave 70 guarding the perimeter and inside. 15 of those guys from the voracious cloud continent inside, the demon explained. Misto's reconnaissance abilities were scary. Jonah was glad that he had been able to recruit the man into his team, and Seth allowed him to join Mina's march. The Mist Demon was able to take the role of a mage and a scout. "Sound a little weak. No people who got the serum?" Jonah made sure. "In the underground cells, but none running around freely." "Then we should get things started," the team leader said grimly. "Are you sure we should leave this scum alive?" Ellen asked with an expression of disgust, looking down at the two guards. Ellen was a very bubbly person in general, but these people really made her want to do something extreme. Even if one said they were just guards, these guys were not clueless about what was going on behind these walls, yet they had just been holding a completely normal conversation as if their job wasn't guarding a place that held and systematically killed innocent people. Jonah looked at her for a moment. Don't get your hands dirty for these guys, Ellen. There are worse people to kill. What's the point in killing the small fries? In the end, everyone had to make a living, even if it meant selling their humanity. Not everyone had the strength to speak out against a corrupted society and run away or live in the underground. They couldn't help it if they had to kill the guards who fought back, but these guys were not the people responsible for these facilities. What was the point in killing them, when they didn't stand in their way anymore? Jonah explained it to her in a few words, and Ellen accepted it with a sigh. He had also spoken out for the rest of them to hear him. Then I will take out the guys in the surveillance room, next. Then I can give you an update through the comm orb, Misto said and turned into a foggy breeze. The team on the other hand went around the building to the loading ramp, where another unconscious guard was laying. The back door was unlocked. Before they entered, they waited for the demon's signal. I took over the surveillance room and the control over the security system, it sounded through the communication orb. One had to commend how far Y-City had come in the fusion of technology and magic when it came to their safety measures, but they had yet to install something that could stop the magic fog the demon turned into. With the surveillance room and security system under their control, the rest was simple. Get rid of the guards and evacuate the captives. However, on their way through the aula, they suddenly faced a single man waiting for them. I'm an external elder of the Night Sparrow sect, face me in a duel, cowardly intruder. One of the weirdos from the voracious continent cried out, when they met him while brandishing his sword. There was no doubt the man was strong, probably comparable to an adventurer in the late Leave 80s with a rare class, but no hurdle for Jonah who had a god's blessing and crossed Leave 100 recently. The vampiric swordsman didn't even use any active skill, as he quickly disarmed the man with the sword of chains and proceeded to split his head in one fluid motion, to silence him. However, the deed was done. There was a commotion after the sword cultivator's cry, and the rest of these external elders grouped together to fight them in this hall, spouting nonsense about the righteous way and cowardly actions. God, you are annoying. You want a group fight? Have it. Ellen was finally so annoyed by them, that she unleashed a flood of slimes onto them. The hall where the elders thought they would have an advantage quickly became their tomb as they drowned in jelly bodies. They tried their best, using weird magics and talismans, but there was little they could do to the slimes Ellen had bred with all her care and was supporting with her skills and the help of Seth's legendary ring. Her Ring of the General had not many options aside from the basic options that came from the legendary Olympic Silver. But the option it had allowed her to boost the power of her subordinates, the slimes, by 150% in addition to better control, strengthened buffs, and passive resistance to crowd control. It was a scary item to give any class that focused on creating an army of subordinates. Evan, the monster tamer, had a similar ring. When the slimes were done, nothing of these external elders remained, except for some of their items. They had found out from Master Mountain, but also through the experience of Cade and the hero, that these people often had spatial rings and pouches and even some useful artifacts and weapons with them. Although they couldn't really appraise or use them, they could let Master Mountain have a look and tell them what the items could do and take out what was in their pouches and space rings. With the elders out of their way, there was no one left in the building to stop them, so they started evacuating the prisoners. Arg! They were letting out the children from the rooms where the sects held their chosen captives, when they heard a cry from the end of the hallway. When they ran there, they found Beemant. His helmet was off and he was heavily bleeding from his throat. Beside him stood a young girl. Her hand was bloody and she looked down at the adventurer with a cold smile. Hat, to fall so easily because you judge your opponent based on their outer appearance. Pathetic. Beemant. Jonah called out, getting the girl's attention. You seem a little stronger. Could it be you are one of those chosen, I heard about? She swung her hand, shedding Beemant's blood from her fingers. Who are you? The swordsman asked her suspiciously, counting on their weird habit to announce their name or standing before doing anything. Who? They call me Fairy Silk Moth. I'm an internal disciple of the Silk River sect, I thunk. Ugh. With a heavy thunk, the fairy keeled over. Beemant bashed in her head from behind with his shield. While Jonah kept her attention, Beemant had showered himself in potions to heal his cut throat. When his life was not threatened anymore, physically, he did something for his mental health and bashed the daylights out of the little witch. What happened, Beemant? The swordsman asked, confused. She was acting like an afraid little girl. I took my helmet off because I thought it scared her. When she got closer she suddenly stabbed her hand in my neck. He answered, rubbing his bloodied neck. I see, everyone, be careful. If you feel better, you can keep going, he gave instruction through the comm orb. What about her? Beamant asked. Tie her up and bring her, too. Maybe we can get info from her.